I'm Judy Woodruff. Gorbachev in Cuba. The defense opens in the Oliver North trial, the hot Chicago mayor's race, one Alaskan fishing village after the oil spill, and an essay on a sports hero knowing when to quit. Coming up on the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour.
Good evening. Leading the news this Monday, Soviet leader Gorbachev opened talks with Fidel Castro in Havana. President Bush said he supports the goal of ending Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The U.S. accused nationalist guerrillas of violating the Namibian independence agreement. We'll have details in our news summary in a moment. Judy Woodruff is in Washington tonight. Judy?
After the news summary, Mikhail Gorbachev's visit to Cuba is our lead focus. We have an extended report from correspondent Charles Krause. Then the defense opens its side of the story in the Oliver North trial. Nina Totenberg joins us to explain. Next, Elizabeth Brackett looks at the bitterly fought race for mayor of Chicago. We have a report on how the Alaskan oil spill is affecting one small fishing village. And essayist Ann Taylor Fleming wonders about an aging basketball star. Here in Washington, President Bush met with Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak and said afterwards that he agrees there is a need for a properly structured Middle East peace conference and for an end to Israel's occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The president's statements came in the Rose Garden after the hour-long meeting.
Egypt and the United States share the goals of security for Israel, the end of the occupation, and achievement of Palestinian political rights. These are the promises held out by a sustained commitment to a negotiated settlement, towards which a properly structured international conference could play a useful role at an appropriate time.
A majority of the Israeli people is shaping up in support of peace. World powers are adopting constructive policies designed to help the parties reach agreement. In short, the situation is ripe for an active effort more than ever before.
President Bush's statements are seen by some observers as possibly exerting pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, who is due to visit Mr. Bush this Thursday. The defense began to present its case today in the Oliver North trial. A witness testified that the late CIA Director William Casey had said that President Reagan designated Oliver North to handle the Nicaraguan Contras' military needs in the event of a congressional ban on official U.S. aid. North contends that he was taking care of the Contras under orders from higher-ups. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court today refused to stop North's trial or to block the trials of two of his co-defendants, former National Security Advisor John Poindexter and arms dealer Albert Hakim. The justices didn't give a reason, but they rejected North's attorney's arguments that grand jurors and grand jury witnesses have been exposed to the highly publicized congressional testimony of all three men.
Relatives of people killed in the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Scotland last December met President Bush today and complained of insensitive treatment by the government. They told the president they'd been treated with incompetence and lack of compassion by the State Department. Afterwards, they rallied in a park across the street from the White House and called for a congressional probe of the bombing. Bert Ammerman, brother of one of the dead, said it now appeared that the tragedy could have been prevented.
The information, the revelations that have taken place in the last 4 to 5 weeks gives an indication to most Americans that there was enough forewarning to detect the plastic bombing that was in place on Pan Am Flight 103. The only way that we'll get an answer to that is to have an independent ad hoc committee to bring all these agencies together to answer these questions.
Transportation Secretary Samuel Skinner announced new regulations to prevent sky terrorism. He said all airlines would have to obey all Federal Aviation Administration bulletins warning of possible threats and steps to avoid them. Until now, such recommendations have been advisory. Skinner said all airlines would have to install devices to detect plastic explosives in high-risk airports throughout the world, a measure that could take years to complete.
That's it for the news summary. Still ahead, Mikhail meets Fidel. Oliver North goes on the offensive. Chicago's bitter mayoral race, Alaska after the spill, and an aging athlete's last hurrah.
Still to come on the NewsHour, the Oliver North trial, the mayoral election in Chicago, the Alaska oil spill, and an essay on aging athletes.
Next tonight, the case of the United States versus Oliver North. The trial, now in its 10th week, entered a new phase today. The defense began presenting its case, calling 4 witnesses to testify for the former White House aide. Nina Totenberg of National Public Radio was there, and now she joins us. Nina, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
What was it that the defense was trying to prove today? And then tell us whether they achieved that or not.
Well, we don't yet know exactly what the defense strategy is going to be, but I would say that their best witness today was a fellow by the name of Vincent Canestraro, and he proved, or at least he testified, to a number of things that the defense wants on the record. Mr. Canestraro said that he worked for an agency of the United States government, unidentified, but it later became quite clear that it was the CIA, and he later was transferred to the National Security Council, where he worked with North. Now, the big bombshell that he testified to today was that he had been present at a meeting with CIA Director William Casey and others, at which Casey said that Oliver North had been selected by higher-ups to, in essence, replace the CIA if the Boland Amendment passed banning military and intelligence aid to the Contras, that Oliver North would become the contact man for paramilitary operations for the Contras. And he testified that Casey said that that authorization for that deed, for Oliver North becoming the contact man, that it was authorized by the President of the United States. He said, Mr. Casey said he discussed it with the President of the United States, and this was how it was to be handled. That was the big item that he testified to.
Now, is this something that has come out before now, or is this the first time we've heard this in so many words?
This is the first time we've heard this in so many words, and I'm told that Mr. Canestraro did not say that precisely at all in his grand jury testimony, and you can be sure that he will be under rigorous cross-examination on this point tomorrow.
He was not cross-examined today.
He was not cross-examined today.
Right.
He also testified that there was great concern at the National Security Council about leaks from Congress, and he testified about threats to North's life from the terrorist organization Abu Nidal, and those threats seemed very real, and he testified about how he had tried to get protection for North and had been unable to do that. And of course, when North did get protection in the form of a security fence paid for by arms dealer Richard Secor, that became the basis for one of the charges against him, accepting an illegal gratuity.
So he was trying to explain that there was a reason, there was a real need for this kind of
That's
security.
right. So he was a very good witness for the defense.
Now, what about the other 3 witnesses? Did any of them have anything that materially affected the way this is going?
Well, the most interesting other witness was the former CIA General Counsel, Stanley Sporkin, now a federal judge. And I would say that he turned the tables on the defense. You know, in the past we've talked about prosecution witnesses who became witnesses for the defense. This was a defense witness who became a witness for the prosecution. And he was testifying on direct examination about the finding that he drafted for the President to sign, authorizing the Iran arms sale and authorizing that notification to Congress be deferred. Brendan Sullivan, the defense counsel, kept referring to it as no notification, and he kept correcting him as saying deferred notification. On cross-examination, prosecutor David Zorno really made the most of Sporkin, and he asked him a series of questions. Did this authorization, did you contemplate lying to Congress? Answer, no. Did you contemplate altering or shredding documents? Answer, no. Did you contemplate lying to the Attorney General? Answer, no.
So what's the significance of that all coming
Well,
out
the
then?
significance really could be read on Oliver North's face. He got bright red when Sporkin was testifying about how he had been around town a long time and he would never lie to Congress. You tell it straight. He's Sporkin. You tell it straight or you don't tell it at all. If you don't have permission to tell the secrets, then you say you're sorry, you're not free to answer, but you do not lie. And at that point, Oliver North just flushed red.
Now, are these things said in a subtle way, or were they said so clearly that there was no mistaking what he was talking about?
There was no mistaking. These were direct questions. You know, did you authorize, was this an authorization to lie? Or did you lie to Congress? Did you tell the truth? And he said, oh no, I've been around this town too long. You tell the facts straight. And that's when Oliver North looked very embarrassed.
Now, there were two other witnesses today. Ellen Garwood, who is a wealthy, now widow, who gave money for the Contra cause.
She directly contradicted one of the prosecution's witnesses. Carl Channel, who organized the National Endowment for the Preservation of Liberty, which raised money for the Contras, had testified that she had twice written out checks in support of the Contras for military supplies in the presence of Oliver North, and she said that, quote, was a lie, that she had not.
Did she come across as believable, or is it possible to make that sort of a judgment?
Well, she did come across as very believable. She was sort of your classic character figure out of a play, kind of doddering in with her coat. It was 80 degrees in that courtroom. She had a sweater and a coat on and a hat, and she clutched the coat around her as she testified in a very firm voice, lecturing the jury about the threat of communism at great length, and saying that she had told the President of the United States that what he needed to do was get rid of Secretary of State Schultz because he was hurting the Contras too. So she was believable up to a point, but on cross-examination, an essential part of her testimony on a related matter, she had testified that Oliver North had not been present when a list of weapons had been drawn up, and she was faced with her grand jury testimony, which was exactly to the contrary. So I would say,
how did she deal with that?
She said when she heard that, well, perhaps I said that. My mind was clearer back then. I don't deny it. My husband has died since, and I've had a lot of tragedy.
So in a case like that, when she's testified one thing and Channel has testified just the opposite, it's going to be up to the jury to make up its mind about who's more believable.
It's going to be up to the jury, although in the last analysis, I suppose the prosecution will make the argument that it may not matter exactly whether North was in the room when the check was written, that this was a scam where one guy would make the argument and the other guy would make the hit.
One last quick point. Last Friday, Judge Gazelle told North's attorneys that he was not going to require President Reagan to testify on North's behalf. Now, does that have a material effect on the outcome of this trial?
Well, it does, because it means Mr. Reagan will not come and testify either as a character witness for Oliver North or to say that he did or did not authorize lying to Congress or the other things that North did. And the judge said in his opinion, he said, basically, he pointed out that there is not one shred of testimony, is what he said, to show authorization, that the President authorized these activities. Even if, for example, Mr. Canestrero's testimony today is shown to be true, that Oliver North had authorization to violate the Boland Amendment, that is not what he's charged with. He's charged with lying to Congress and shredding documents, and that's what the defense has to show, that he had authorization for that.
All right, Nina Totenberg, once again, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Judy.